The sin you are in may not be your own. I never knew my mum. She left me in the hands and powerful clenched fists of someone who answered to Dad, but behaved more like mad. 17 years of watching him abuse my two sisters and also me, each of us in very different and sickening ways, had left me pretty much destroyed by the time I asked him about the woman who had given birth to me. He was drunk as usual, sat in his wheelchair, this a result of a car accident that killed Kate, my younger sister, and left me with a severe speech defect. A shard of metal window lining had pierced my brain and the area known as Broca's area, vital for speech production. Sitting across from him and in my slurred and blurred voice, I simply came out with it. Dad, who was my mum, and what was she like? He took a long slug from his bottle of old grandpa, which left me with the thought this was going to be yet another wasted moment of an already wasted life for both of us. But instead, he placed the bottle on his sideboard and wheeled himself to a bookshelf that had only two shelves. On these two shelves there were only two books. One I could see was a King James's Bible, standard reading for a drunk bastard like he was, hoping for a redemption that would never come, but which this book, he believed, offered salvation. He did not touch the Word of God. The Word of God certainly did not touch him. Instead, he opened a book whose title I could not see and removed from it a bookmark before placing the book back on the shelf and then wheeling himself back to his position ahead of me and next to his true faith, the bottle of moonshine. The bookmark looked leathery and old, and he held it up, almost wistfully in the strange light that always seemed to inhabit the lounge in which we both sat. I felt that a ghost would not have felt comfortable in this illumination. My father was covered in tattoos, all of which he had had when he was in the Navy many years ago. He had been dishonourably discharged after he had been found drunk in charge of a weapon, firing it randomly into the air after a drill sergeant had criticised his lack of comradeship. I knew what the sergeant meant. Finally, he answered my question, not with a verbal response, but by handing me the bookmark. I took it from him and looked at it carefully. I realised that it was a piece of skin. Human skin. Upon it, in worn-away blue ink, was a tattooed love heart, above which was my father's nickname, Double Down, thanks to his proclivity for blackjack and gambling in general, and below it was my mother's name, Susan. I began to weep as I realised that in the days before laser removal of tattoos, the only method available was a skin graft. This was the object I now held in my shaking hands. I am not willing to say anything more, said my father, but that now belongs to you. He wheeled himself away from me to wherever he wheeled himself to. I did not much care. Holding the bookmark in my hands and clasping them to my heart, I did one more thing before leaving an old and pointless life behind, in order to try and find something more worthwhile. I took just a few tentative steps to the bookshelf in order to see where a piece of my father, of my mother, and also of me had lain occluded for all these years. It was an 1859 first edition of a book written by Samuel Smiles. On the first page, where the first edition blurb resided, was a handwritten note. It read, I love you, Jack. Always yours, Sue. Jack was my father's real name, and the book was called Self-Help.